She came to Utah for a new beginning, a bright, soft-spoken 26-year-old woman full of hope, faith, and dreams. Elizabeth Elena Laguna Salgado had only been in the United States for a month when she vanished. Without a sound, without a trace, in broad daylight, in the middle of a quiet college town. For 3 long years, her family begged for answers. Search crews scoured streets and canyons. Flyers fluttered on telephone poles, rumors spread, but Elizabeth had simply disappeared. Then one spring afternoon in 2018, high in the Hobble Creek Canyon, a hiker stumbled upon a horror buried beneath the pine needles and dirt. Elizabeth had been found, but her story was far from over. Who took her? How did she end up miles from where she was last seen? Why did no one see or hear a thing? This is the haunting, still unsolved case of Elizabeth Salgado, and tonight we walk the same path she did, through the quiet streets of Provo. If you crave chilling stories, bone-rattling horror news, and the twisted tales that haunt your dreams, you found your dark corner of YouTube. This is Horror Locker, your guide through the macabre, the mysterious, and the downright terrifying. So light a candle, lock the doors, and let's dive into the darkness together. Elizabeth Elena Laguna Salgado was born into warmth, humility, and deep faith. She came into this world in Chiapas, Mexico in the late 1980s, one of the youngest in a large, tightly bonded family. Raised in a home that valued education and religion, Elizabeth grew up knowing the power of both knowledge and prayer. Her childhood was ordinary in the best of ways. Her laughter echoed in the hallways of her family's modest home. She helped her mother in the kitchen, played with her siblings in dusty village streets, and always did well in school. But above all else, Elizabeth carried a kindness that left an impression on anyone she met. She had a way of listening, not just hearing, but truly listening, like your words mattered. As she entered young adulthood, Elizabeth joined the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Her faith became more than belief, it became her mission. She served a full-time mission in Mexico and taught English to local children, many of whom would later say they remembered her not just as a teacher, but as a role model. But Elizabeth wanted more. She wanted to go further, to expand her education, experience life beyond the borders she'd known. She dreamed of learning fluent English, earning a degree, maybe even teaching professionally. That dream brought her to a decision that would change everything. In March of 2015, after careful planning, visas, and preparation, Elizabeth packed her life into a suitcase and boarded a plane. Her destination, Provo, Utah, a quiet city nestled beneath the Wasatch Mountains, a place filled with fellow members of her faith, a place she believed would be safe. She had enrolled in an intensive English course at Nomen Global Language Center. She had found housing. She had connected with a local LDS ward. Everything was falling into place. To her family, she seemed excited, nervous, yes, but full of hope. Elizabeth had taken the first steps toward building the life she had long envisioned. She had only been in Utah for 3 weeks. The next chapter of her story would unfold in silence. It was April 16th, 2015, a Thursday. The sun had broken through the spring clouds, casting soft light across the tidy streets of Provo, Utah. Elizabeth Salgado, now 3 weeks into her new life, woke early. She dressed modestly, as she always did, her long dark hair framing a gentle, thoughtful face. She texted with family back in Mexico that morning, quick, cheerful exchanges. She told them everything was going well. At around 9 a.m., she headed to class at Nomen Global, a language school nestled in a quiet neighborhood just a short walk from downtown. She was still adjusting to the rhythm of American life. The pace, the people, the language, everything was new. But Elizabeth was eager. Her instructors remembered her as polite, attentive, and determined. Class ended shortly after 1 p.m. Witnesses saw her leave the school building. She smiled, waved goodbye to classmates, and then she began the walk home. A walk she had done before. Less than 2 miles, broad daylight, sidewalks, stop signs, cafes with open windows. A route so ordinary, so safe, no one would have thought to fear for her. But Elizabeth never arrived at her apartment. Her phone went silent just after 1:30 p.m. No texts, no calls, no messages. She vanished somewhere along that route, and not a single person saw it happen. When she missed a planned church activity that evening, friends grew concerned. By nightfall, she wasn't answering her phone. The next day, her family in Mexico, who had always heard from her daily, were in a panic. She was gone. Just like that. No signs of struggle. No known enemies. No farewell message. No footprints. No witnesses. Cameras in the area didn't capture anything unusual. It was as if, somewhere between school and home, the world had quietly swallowed her whole. The police were called. Then the FBI. Search teams combed the sidewalks, the alleys, the parks. Her face appeared on flyers in Spanish and English. Volunteers knocked on doors, asking the same questions over and over. Did you see her? Did anyone see her? But no one had. It wasn't just disturbing. It was impossible. Elizabeth Salgado had disappeared in the middle of the day, in the middle of the city, on a walk she'd taken before, and there was no trace. This was no runaway. This was no accident. Something had happened to Elizabeth, something dark, and someone knew. But for now, all anyone had were questions and silence. In the days following Elizabeth Salgado's disappearance, hope burned hot and fast. There was no time to waste. Friends from church organized search parties. Her classmates and roommates scoured neighborhoods and parking lots. Provo police began canvassing the area. Volunteers handed out missing person flyers in English and Spanish. Strangers who had never met her, who didn't even speak her language, were now walking side by side through the streets of Provo, calling out her name. Elizabeth's family in Mexico was devastated. Her parents, heartbroken and terrified, arranged to travel to Utah. They didn't speak English. They didn't know the area. But they knew their daughter would never have just vanished on her own. The FBI stepped in. Immigration services, Homeland Security, even Interpol were contacted. Every possible agency with jurisdiction took a look at her case. Authorities checked the sex offender registry, combed through bus and train records, and traced every known lead. Cell phone towers had last pinged her location near the school. But then, silence. There was no ransom call, no suspicious transactions, no social media activity, no body, just a void. The media picked up her story. Local TV anchors stood near the sidewalk where she was last seen, repeating the same details again and again. 26-year-old Elizabeth Elena Laguna Salgado, 5'3", last seen wearing a denim jacket, walking home in the middle of the day. But despite all the attention, nothing came in. No credible leads, no witnesses, not a single camera captured her walking that route. No car was reported speeding away. Not even a scream was heard. It didn't make sense. Provo was considered a safe town, especially for someone within the close-knit LDS community. How could someone just disappear? Whispers began to spread. Some speculated she had been followed. Others believed someone she trusted had offered her a ride. Maybe someone from church, maybe someone who knew she wouldn't say no. But it was all just speculation. No evidence, no suspect, no answers. As weeks passed, posters began to fade. The hotline grew quiet, and that once blazing fire of urgency slowly dimmed to embers. In April of 2017, 2 years after she disappeared, a $50,000 reward was offered. Her family, still aching, still praying, never stopped asking questions. They held vigils, pleaded in interviews, refused to give up hope. But the truth was, the case had gone cold, and somewhere out there someone still knew what happened. The question now wasn't just where she had gone. It was whether they would ever find her. 3 years had passed. 3 long years of silence, prayer, rumors, and dead ends. Elizabeth's face had slowly disappeared from storefront windows and telephone poles. Her name, once spoken daily by neighbors and news anchors, now lingered only in hushed conversations and fading memories. But her family never stopped waiting. Then came the afternoon of May 18th, 2018. A man, just a hiker, out for some peace and air, was walking a secluded trail in Hobble Creek Canyon. It's a quiet place, about 15 miles southeast of Provo. Not remote enough to be wilderness, but still far enough from the city that the world feels distant. The air was crisp, the pines swayed gently. The path was uneven, overgrown in places, like it hadn't been walked in months. He wasn't looking for anything, just hiking. And then he saw something. Something unnatural half buried beneath leaves and dirt. Bones. Torn scraps of clothing. A horror that turned his stomach and froze him in place. Authorities were called. Yellow tape soon cut through the trees, marking the trail like an open wound. Investigators moved carefully, reverently. The remains had been exposed to the elements for years. There were no clear signs of trauma, no weapon, no cause of death visible. But there was enough, just enough, for DNA testing. Days later, the results came in. The remains belonged to Elizabeth Elena Laguna Salgado. After 3 years, she had finally been found. But this wasn't closure, this was just the next nightmare. The spot where she was found, off trail, hard to reach, suggested someone had gone to great effort to conceal her. It wasn't a random place. It wasn't somewhere she would have wandered to on her own. Someone had driven her there. Someone had carried her up that slope, hidden her body beneath dirt and brush, and then disappeared back into society like nothing had happened. There were no cameras in the canyon, no witnesses, no fresh leads. The autopsy couldn't even determine how she died. There were no broken bones, no bullets, no stab wounds, no definitive cause of death. The only certainty was that someone put her there and didn't want her found. Elizabeth's family returned to the canyon weeks later. They held a memorial among the trees, right where her remains had been discovered. Her mother wept. Her father clutched a framed photo of her, the same one used on every missing person flyer. They had answers now, but not the ones they prayed for. The police officially ruled it a homicide. But without a cause of death, without suspects, without witnesses, the case remained as cold as the mountain soil. And as the wind rustled through the trees, whispering through the pines where Elizabeth had lain for years, one question echoed louder than ever. Who put her there, and why? Elizabeth Salgado was found, but justice was not. Her bones rested in a canyon, but her story still wandered the shadows. And as the shock of her discovery settled, the question twisted deeper. Who did this? Everyone had a theory. Everyone had a suspicion, but no one had proof. Detectives said there were no signs she had been robbed, no jewelry missing, no phone or wallet recovered, sure, but no signs of theft either. Whoever took her wasn't looking for money. There were no public enemies, no romantic partners, no reported stalkers. She was quiet, respectful, religious, a missionary, a student, a newcomer. So who would want to harm Elizabeth Salgado? The first theory, a stranger. Maybe someone saw her walking home, realized she was alone, and acted on impulse. A crime of opportunity. But in broad daylight, on a busy street, with no scream, no camera footage, no tire tracks, no witnesses, unlikely. Then came the second theory, someone she knew. Police began quietly re-interviewing people from her church, classmates, former roommates, men who had shown interest in her, anyone she may have trusted enough to accept a ride from that day. Because that was the working theory now, that someone offered her a lift, someone she didn't fear, someone who didn't seem like a threat until it was too late. In 2021, a chilling detail surfaced. Investigators revealed that DNA had been found at the scene. Not hers. Someone else's. They never said where it was found. They never released the identity. Only that it didn't match anyone in the national databases. Not yet. Was it the killers? Or just someone who'd been in the canyon before? The third theory took a darker turn. trafficking. Some wondered if Elizabeth had been taken for reasons more organized, more horrifying than a single attack. But this theory was weakened by the fact her remains were recovered. Trafficking victims often vanish permanently. Elizabeth didn't. And finally, there were those who believed this case had a deeply personal motive, that maybe she had unknowingly offended someone. Trusted the wrong person, maybe someone from her inner circle, but no arrests were made, no names released, no official suspects ever identified. And that DNA? Still no match. So now the story lingers between timelines, between countries, between hope and grief. Her killer is still out there, maybe walking the streets of Provo, maybe sitting in a pew, maybe living quietly, hiding in plain sight. Whoever they are, they know what happened that day, and they know the canyon. They know how to disappear, just like Elizabeth did. Time moves on. But for the family of Elizabeth Salgado, the world has not been the same since April 16, 2015. In the years since her disappearance and discovery, her parents have aged under the weight of grief. Her father, once hopeful that she would return alive, now walks with quieter steps. Her mother still clutches the framed photo of Elizabeth. The same smile, the same eyes, frozen in time. They brought her home. To Chiapas, to the village where she was born. There, among her people, they laid her to rest. Not with the peace of closure, but with the exhaustion of not knowing. No trial, no confession, no justice, just silence. Every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, her family holds a memorial. Candles are lit, her favorite songs are played, prayers are whispered into the night, and always, always, the same question is asked: why? Elizabeth was not reckless. She was not running. She had no secret life. She was a daughter, a missionary, a student. She came to the United States to learn, to grow, to believe in something better. And she was taken. We may never know what happened in those final moments. We may never know what was said in the car, what the last thing she saw was, what her final thought might have been. But we do know this: someone knows, someone walks free, and someone may yet speak. Until then, Elizabeth's story remains an echo, a quiet voice that lingers in classrooms, in church pews, and in the lonely wind through Hobble Creek Canyon. A voice that asks, gently but endlessly, will you remember me? This was the story of Elizabeth Elena Laguna Salgado. If you have any information about her case, contact the Utah County Sheriff's Office. Her story isn't over, and justice is still waiting. If you made it this far, congratulations. You've survived for now. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell, because in the world of horror, you never know what's lurking next. Got a creepy story, a twisted theory, or a horror film you think we should unearth? Drop it in the comments. I'll be watching. Until next time, stay curious, stay cautious, and whatever you do, don't look behind you.